Something that I've been thinking a lot about as people are starting to read the Quran for the first time is how the Quran is commentary or essentially coming or was revealed to correct the record of the Torah and the Bible. And one of the stories that I can't stop thinking about that I think is particularly relevant to this moment with the conflict between Israel and Palestine, and the Israeli oppression of Palestinians and the genocide that's going on right now, is the story of Hagar. So if you don't know, Abraham is the father of the Abrahamic religions. He's the messenger who first brought the monotheistic message to modern day society. He's the one who smashed the idols, who jumped into the fire, who sacrificed his son. Abraham's whole vibe is leap of faith, right? Abraham is the purveyor of faith in the one true God. Most people don't know that Abraham had two wives. His first wife was a woman named Sarah, and Sarah got really, really old and was pretty barren. And this was kind of a problem because God had promised Abraham that Abraham's children would be the ones who would carry his covenant or promise with God and the message of God. They would be the ones who would bring that to humanity and society over and over again. And they would be the ones that would hold society accountable to that. And so Abraham needed to have children, right? Sarah, God-fearing woman, was like, okay, Abraham, you need to have children. I can't have children. So why don't you marry my maidservant, Hagar? Abraham takes Hagar as his second wife. Now, who is Hagar, right? Hagar is an Egyptian woman. A lot of scholars believe she was enslaved, that she was a concubine. Some more recent scholars have said she was actually a princess, that she was the daughter of the king or pharaoh of Egypt at the time. Her name, I think, is particularly interesting. She's believed to be of North African Arab descent, and her name means the foreigner or the other or the stranger or the forsaken, or some would say the immigrant or the exiled. And I think names in biblical texts, right, are really interesting. So this story is from Genesis chapter 16 and chapter 21. And the Quran then comments on it, but the Quran never actually names Hagar by name. Her name in Arabic is hājar, which then it has like similar roots to the word hijra, which is the migration, or to hajj, which is the pilgrimage that Muslims must go on. Anyway, Abraham marries Hagar, and some scholars will say they don't actually get married, that they just, she's used as a handmaid to have a child. Regardless, Hagar gives birth to a child named Ishmael, known as Ishmael in modern day biblical tradition. And then Sarah, out of crazy miracle of God, also gets pregnant. And she's super old and was barren. And Sarah's child is named Isaac or Ishaq. Sarah, when Hagar is pregnant, according to the Torah, gets upset and decides to, after Hagar gives birth, decides to send Hagar away into exile and makes Abraham do it. And Abraham performs this kind of passive role. Hagar goes into the desert, what is modern day Mecca, okay, which is the birthplace of Islam, which is where Prophet Muhammad lived when the Quran was revealed to him. And there she's with her little child, Ishmael, and they're in the barren desert, and they feel like they've been forsaken by God, right? This is a woman who, by some accounts, is oppressed. She was an enslaved woman, low status, and then is exiled by her husband and goes out into the desert all alone with her child, single mom, and she is thirsty and her child is dying of thirst. And so she starts running between the mountains of Safa and Marwa, which is now present day part of the Muslim pilgrimage of Hajj. Hājar, Hajj, Hagar, it all connects. So God in that moment says, I'm with you. And he sends Hagar an angel. You could take that metaphorically or literally, and creates water for her in the barren desert. And she's able to feed her child, and then from there dwells a beautiful and wonderful civilization, right? Here's where this story relates to the story of Israel and Palestine. Judeo-Christian religions trace their lineage back to Isaac, to Sarah. And Islam, in a lot of cases, some scholars will dispute this, traces its lineage back to Ishmael. Islam literally traces its lineage back to a woman who was forsaken, the stranger, the other, in a lot of cases considered the enslaved concubine, right? The oppressed. And in the Islamic interpretation, as actually in the Bible and the Torah, God says he is with the oppressed. He shows up and creates water in barren land, right? If you take that metaphorically, God literally makes what is not possible possible for the oppressed. And I think this is really interesting because to me, this indicates that this all kind of goes back to these stories and battles of lineage. And obviously what's going on in Israel and Palestine is not an issue of religion. And yet stories in religion are used to justify the oppression of a people, right? They're used to fight back against claims of legitimacy, to say, oh no, not TikTok cut me off. But these stories are used to say, oh no, the message of God can't come from your people. It only comes from our people. We're the only purveyors and holders of the message of God. And what I love about Islam is it not only challenges that, it actually says the message of God can come from anyone and that it can come from the most oppressed, right? If Muhammad is part of the lineage of Hagar, then it comes from what is perceived to be the lineage of an enslaved person. Muhammad himself was an orphan, a person that most people would say, oh, what even is his lineage, you know? And I find that really beautiful because a lot of Israeli activists started to name their kids Hagar starting in the 1970s as a form of protest and to really indicate that they were pro-reconciliation among the Arabs and the Jews of the region. And I think it's really, really important to read and know about these stories. This is just my research and my interpretation based on reading a bunch of different scholars. You might come to different conclusions, but I think when we have this knowledge, it really, really empowers us to understand what's going on and what's being used against people.